Hey everyone, today we're looking at the add-ons from DBD's history that make you go, wait what? We'll be looking at some of the most ridiculously awful add-ons that have existed over the years. The Ghost Soot, released in 1.0.0 or the launch of the game, and belonged to one of the three killers at the time, the Wraith. This add-on was bizarre because it enabled you to become stealthy even when uncloaked. The way this add-on worked was that you became undetectable, but only when you uncloaked and remained still. Once fully uncloaked, so long as you didn't move, you'd have no terror radius. This seems insane to me, an add-on that lets you be stealthy, but with the caveat that you can't move, on a character who is already stealthy and able to move. What's the benefit of this? What was its purpose? Admittedly, it's cool too. I would love to see this return, just maybe not for Wraith, but someone else entirely. Black Grease was changed in 4.1.0. This was one of Billy's add-ons. This was an add-on introduced with Billy's Overheat rework, a rework which brought along a new ability which was quite heavily disliked, causing Billy's chainsaw to overheat with overuse. With it came a bunch of new add-ons, one of them being Black Grease, which replaced the Thompson mix. And what did it do? Well, it had quite a narrow activation requirement. It accelerated the dissipation rate of the chainsaw's heat by 5 charges a second, as in it made the chainsaw cool faster, but only when a flashlight was shining on you, as in the beam was being continually shined at you. That was the only time this was taking effect. This means you must have gotten value for maybe, how long does it take to flashlight blind someone? 3 seconds? 2 seconds? The value is beyond minimal. It's microscopic and crazy this ever existed, honestly. In 7.5.0, Black Grease was removed from the game completely with the Overdrive rework and the Thompson's Mix triumphant return. Throes Compilation was an add-on introduced in 4.6.0, the Trickster's launch patch. It's our first iridescent add-on of the video, and it was truly terrible. Although, like many of the add-ons on this list, had a really great idea that can definitely and should be worked with at some point. It could be so cool. This add-on made it so your blades changed their level of effectiveness based on the distance you were from the survivor. For example, if you were far away, you only did 50% of a laceration bar, but if you were really close, this scaled up. For each blade hit, you'd increase the amount of laceration you got up to 200% per blade. The only downside, and honestly the kicker for why it was so awful, is you'd lose all of the laceration progress if you missed a single blade. A thing that's so terrible due to the fact that Trickster had throwing recoil at the time, and the blade spread was inconsistent compared to now, so it was an inaccurate scattershot type of power that offered a high accuracy add-on that required consistent hits. Trickster was on a bit of a streak on release for awful add-ons. His other iridescent at the time, Iridescent Photocard, also released in 4.6.0, had a very strange but also super cool effect. Whilst I am sort of slating these add-ons, don't get it twisted, I do think a lot of them are awesome ideas. They just need tweaks, I think. I adore these type of add-ons, but I want them to be usable too. This add-on also required you to get a survivor's laceration meter up to 1 away from the maximum, which I believe was 7 at the time, with 8 being the maximum, so no small number. When you got up to 7 blades, they'd become exposed. Actually, something sort of there, no? The kicker though, there's usually a kicker, this add-on stopped you from downing people with your blades alone, as in you had to use the exposed status to down them. The blades were no longer able to. The highest you could get to was 7 or 8 lacerations, which is insane as an offering and a complete backstep as an iridescent add-on, allowing your power to not be used for damage anymore. Summoning Stone is an add-on that released in 4.2.0 with the Blight, and mimicked one of Blight's own perks, Hex Blood Favor. This perk originally blocking pallets within a 16-meter radius of your position for 15 seconds, every time you hit a survivor. This effect was mimicked by a Summoning Stone, but to a smaller degree, with it having a far smaller range of just 12 meters, and shorter duration of just 6 seconds originally. This made the add-on truly terrible. Blood Favor at the time was actually very ineffective itself, as the effect spanned from your position as the killer, and not the survivors like it does now. This meant Summoning Stone was even worse, with with its reduced range and tiny timer of 6 seconds. It was basically useless for any given situation, despite the effect sounding really powerful. It was truly terrible. It had no effect basically. Cracked Turtle Egg was an add-on released with the HAG in 1.3.1. An oddity of the early days HAG add-ons were that many of them had downsides despite their effects not being that strong. One of the most egregious cases of this was Cracked Turtle Egg, an add-on that increased the duration the Trap Phantasm appeared by 35%. Okay, sure, not too bad. I think the base time back then was a 5-second duration after it triggered, so this add-on gave it an extra 1.75 seconds. But, and this is a very big but, it also provided the effect of a whopping 50% reduction to your teleport range. Bear in mind too that HAG's original teleport distance was just 32 meters, meaning this add-on reduced her teleport range down to just 16, I believe, which is barely anything. It was changed later on in 2.1.0 along with an overall extension to her teleport range. This was a green, or a current blue rarity add-on too, trading off a bonus to a weaker area of her power for this abysmally bad nerf is crazy. Scrap Tape is one of the most fascinating add-ons in the game, and originally was added in 3.5.0 alongside a rework to the Doctor. This add-on survived for just one full patch before it was removed from the game. Yup, it just got removed entirely and replaced by Iridescent Queen. Not a bad trade-off to be fair. A patch later and Scrap Tape was reintroduced, with its rarity going from uncommon to rare, which you may think must have been down to it getting a cool new effect. Well, no, it was exactly the same actually. But what does this add-on do? Well, it's one of few in this video you can go test now. This add-on changes Doctor's Shock to have a circular shape, but with a hollow center, sort of like a donut. This makes it abysmally hard to actually hit the survivors, with this ring being massive and the center part often stopping you from hitting survivors in close proximity. Unless survivors decide to run away from you in a circular formation, it's basically useless. It is more than likely meant to be paired with interview tape though, which gives the shock a central line to pair with the circle, making it half decent. Lickitung is an add-on actually quite famous for being so awful, with many such as OTS exposing its true inefficiency to the world. It was added in patch 5.0.0 alongside the release of the Nemesis. This add-on quite simply gave the effect of increasing the duration of the hinder status after contaminating or slapping a survivor with your tentacle by 0.15 seconds. 0.15, bear in mind, added to a base 2 seconds, of a 20% reduction in speed. In essence, when you infected a survivor, they were being slowed down by 20% for an additional 0.15 seconds, which is almost immeasurable in how little value it provides. It is imperceptible, I would even say, upon use. There was no visible difference, unless you got down to a genuinely microscopic level. A few patches along in 5.3.0 came a buff though, bringing this add-on up from 0.15 seconds to a whopping 0.2 seconds. Yeah, I don't know. Nowadays it's not bad though, which is nice, I guess. Speaking of terribly small improvements, we have the Jaw Smasher, a Deathslinger add-on that still exists today. It provides you a 1.5% increase to your ADS, or aim down sight movement speed. To show this off, I did a little visual test. Here you can see the current Jaw Smasher compared to the regular speed, moving across the length of the shack, which I think is quite a reasonable amount of time to ADS. The difference between the two, by my measurements, was 0.04 seconds. That's what the add-on's providing you with. It's worth noting too that ADSing this long isn't really a good idea with Slinger anyway, and should generally be avoided. It's quite pointless even, I would say, and restricts your vision even more. To make this worse though, this was the slightly buffed version of this add-on, with the 5.3.0 version providing just 1% extra speed when ADSing, which I guess would provide you 0.025 seconds extra distance than without it, so a truly terrible add-on. On the trend of awful passives, we have Polished Maedate, an add-on unchanged since the launch of Oni in 3.4.0. This add-on has never been changed and provides Oni with an additional 0.1 charges per second to his passive recharge rate of Blood Fury. You may not have even realized that Blood Fury had a passive recharge. because it's that slow, and this add-on improves it to 6.5. It's dreadful. Not only this, but this passive isn't even able to fully recharge the power, instead only up to the 98% mark. If you have to rely on this passive meter, it's not a good sign, and buffing it is near useless, I would argue, with how awfully slow it is. Black Box is an add-on for Freddy which nowadays provides a mini Blood Warden effect. It's not amazing, but it's pretty cool and half decent. However, way back upon Freddy's release in 1.8.0, it was far worse. All this add-on did was make the Obsession start the trial in the dream world, and oh no, that was it. And unlike its 3.1.0 version, it didn't even keep them in the dream world all game. You could theoretically spawn as the Obsession, blow up a gen in the first few seconds of the game, and the Eerie add-on had now been completely disregarded, basically. Completely wasted. I don't have much to say about this one, admittedly. It's just clearly incredibly awful, especially for its iridescent quality. It has to be one of the worst. This on top of the fact that Freddy was already the weakest killer in the game upon his release. Low Power Mode is an add-on that was given to Skull Merchant in October 2023, with one of her many reworks in patch 7.3.2. This add-on still exists to this day, and is an add-on that, despite it being so bad, I don't feel like it needs changing, as it does provide a unique, quirky type of gameplay. It's just also a huge shame that it currently exists alongside the soft kill-switched Skull Merchant, who is already basically useless with her base power. This add-on makes it so your drones don't rotate at all, and so the scan lines simply remain stationary. Again, sort of quirky add-on, and fine honestly, as it's a yellow. It could maybe use another demotion, but I think it's fine being a silly effect for this rarity. It's still awful though, especially with Skull Merchant just having one scan line nowadays. You're basically committing this to be a tripwire almost, instead of it allowing for more dynamic tagging during chase. It can work, but it's just so dreadful. Charcoal Stick is another add-on that still exists and has done since the release of the Artist, who released in patch 5.4.0. Much like Artist herself, her add-ons have been barely changed at all since release, which for the most part has been fine. She's a strong character already, and her add-ons are generally decent, aside a few stinkers. One of these stinkers is Charcoal Stick, an add-on that aims to give you a stealthy long-range attack with your crows by making them no longer visible when they're in flight. The downside being that survivors now see the auras of placed crows for 0.5 seconds after being summoned. In essence, you see exactly where a crow is, which direction it's facing, and its general trajectory of where it's going before it's even fired. This basically kills their entire purpose and strength at not only a long range, but also close or mid-range, as you can literally see exactly where the crows are every time. But hey, I guess 0.5 seconds isn't too long, at least. Hellshire Iron is currently not that great, simply providing the undetectable status for 10 seconds after spearing someone. Its original version was far worse though. Back in 3.6.0, this add-on was only active when a survivor was speared, and the effect was to reveal the auras of any other survivors within your terror radius so long as someone was speared. So you speared, and then as long as someone was caught, you'd see other survivor auras in your terror radius. So about 5 to 10 seconds of value you're getting from this, and it's relying on survivors actually being in your terror radius, which back then was also smaller at 24 meters. And then you're also locked in largely, face on, whilst reeling your spear gun, meaning you can't even look around really for auras. And this was an iridescent, really terrible honestly. Iridescent Videotape for Sadako used to be one of the strongest Iris in the game, I would argue, allowing her to cause Condemned to be almost inescapable, funneling survivors toward a single TV. After its change in 7.5.0 though, along with Sadako's rework, it became really bad. It's another add-on that decides to do a trade-off. One positive effect in exchange for a negative. When this happens though, it really needs to be a fair trade-off, otherwise it's pointless, especially as it's an iridescent add-on. The positive is you can teleport to any TV you like, as many times as you like, without turning them off. Pretty good, and allows you a lot of pressure, but it has two downsides. One, you no longer apply Condemned at all, so basically Condemned is gone from your power. 2, if survivors turn off the TVs, they turn off for 20% longer. What? This add-on is inexplicable, I think, in its awfulness, especially for an Iri. Sadako's got a tough power to balance, but this twofold nerf to a decent upside is just terrible. Waterlogged Shoe is a hag add-on that's been through some pretty awful states, and has often been seen as one of the worst iridescent add-ons in the game's history. Its current state is not too bad. The core issue with this add-on is, once again, it's a trade-off. It trades your ability to teleport with an increase to movement speed by 7.5%, and giving your traps a 9% hindered effect when triggered. It's actually kind of usable, and is often known as Chag, Chase Hag, or Chad Hag. This add-on was way worse back in the day though. Not only was Hag super clunky back then, but she also got a far bigger downside of her movement speed not being increased. Nowadays she moves at 4.73 meters per second, which is the fastest base movement of any killer when this is equipped. Back then though, she didn't get this, and so she remained at 4.4 meters per second, plus no teleporting. So yeah, I don't know. Downsides in the early days were fairly frequent and even affected Nurse, which is maybe not such a bad thing. Nurse had the add-on Heavy Panting, which released with her in 1.1.0, her launch patch. This add-on provided debatably just 2 downsides, I would argue. It's definitely debatable, but I do think so. It gave her a moderately increased chain blink window, which is honestly sort of a detriment. Whilst it does provide more reaction time, similar to the current Pocket Watch add-on, it often just slows you down. Most of the time you don't need the hesitation window, and it ends up making your blinks take longer. This especially wouldn't have been necessary back when Nurse had a base of 3 blinks, I believe. You didn't need to hesitate so much really. This add-on also had a downside though, which was to moderately increase the fatigue duration post-blink. Together these two are just nerfs, I would say. Even if one is meant to be a buff, it doesn't quite work out that way. Light Chassis is an add-on that belonged to Billy and was released with the launch of the game back in 2016 and patch 1.0.0 of the game. Admittedly for this one, I'm mainly going off of the description, but when I read it I was too fascinated to not include it. Going off of the wiki, it states that this add-on would reduce the reach of the chainsaw in exchange for a considerable reduction in recovery time after colliding with an object. What does that mean though? My understanding of it is that it probably meant you had to get far closer to the survivor to actually land the hit, this being a downside for an upside of faster recovery time, but only when colliding, remember. That seems like an awful trade-off though, and the devs seem to know this too, as there was an unknown patch, very mysterious, which removed this effect. That's a weird one I know, and it's sort of a speculation more so, but I thought that was super interesting. Cat Block was an add-on for Original Freddy, released with his launch back in 1.8.0. This add-on provided an upside-downside also. The up was that the dream transition was 1.5 seconds shorter, the transition being the time it took for a survivor to fall asleep after you'd pulled them into the dream world, which was a manual action back then. This was actually pretty good as the base was 7 seconds, and so reducing it to 5.5 was pretty nice. Not exceptional, but something. It was essentially the warning time before Freddy could attack you, where you'd see him intermittently. As if you weren't in the dream world, Original Freddy just couldn't damage you. But this is where the kicker of the downside comes. This add-on made it so the survivors would have increased odds to trigger skill checks. Failed skill checks being one of the only ways to counter the dream world back then, as there weren't alarm clocks to use. You had to use teammates or failed skill checks. This would have been an awful trade-off, allowing you to break out even faster if Freddy ever dropped chase. Finally, one of my all-time favourites, Obsidian Goblet. Obsidian Goblet was an add-on belonging to Pyramid Head, and existed for over 5 years since his launch back in 4.0.0, only being changed recently in patch 9.1.0. This add-on was incredibly cool, but was iridescent for some reason. It made it so when you placed your trails as Pyramid Head, you'd be undetectable once you walked on them. Not when placing them, just when walking on them afterwards. Really cool concept, but just really ineffective in practice and truly laughably bad as an Eyrie. It restricted you to walking in places you'd already been, trying to awkwardly connect together areas for stealth. Really bizarre add-on. Alright, well that's gonna do it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.